Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining me here tonight. My name is Amelia Manning, and I am the Career and College Admissions Specialist at Maine West High School. Tonight, we will be talking about financial aid, facts that are important for seniors and their families to know, and then a bit of information about the application that seniors need to complete this year before they graduate. So let's start big picture with what is financial aid in the first place. To put it very simply, financial aid is money to help pay for college or career training or education. More specifically, financial aid helps to cover that difference between what your family can afford to pay for college and what a college actually costs. It's also important for you to know that financial aid can be borrowed, like student loans. It can be given, like a scholarship or a grant, or earned, where a student participates in something like a work study program. And I highlight that because it's important to know that not all financial aid is free. Now, financial aid can come from a variety of different sources. First off, it can come from the US government. If you complete the FAFSA, that is what you are doing, applying for financial aid to come from the US government. It can also come from the state of Illinois, which can also be sought by completing the FAFSA, but is a reason to fill out the alternative application for Illinois financial aid if you are not eligible for the FAFSA. It can then come from the college that your child attends, many times as something that students are considered for at the time that they apply. We call this institutional aid because it comes from the college or university or the institution themselves. And then finally, it can come from nonprofit or private organizations through separate applications. So if you think of it in the way of scholarship applications, whether that be, again, from those nonprofits or from different companies or other organizations out there. So as I mentioned before, financial aid can be borrowed, given, or earned. And another way that we think about this is that financial aid can be considered either gift aid or it can be considered self-help aid. So gift aid includes things like scholarships and grants. Your child can earn scholarships for many different reasons. They can be academic based or merit based. They can be need based in nature. Sometimes students can earn them because they have special characteristics, for instance, being the first in their family to go to college in the United States. Now, these are gift aid because they do not have to be paid back. And another type of that gift aid is in the form of a grant, which is usually something that comes from the government. And again, money that does not have to be paid back. Then moving on to self-help aid. Self-help aid includes student loans, not all of which are bad news, and then work study, which is where a student works on their college campus in exchange for wages. It's not a guarantee of a job, let me clarify that, but I recommend that when students fill out the FAFSA or the alternative application, that they indicate that they want to be considered for work study. And then if they're eligible for it, they can apply for those positions once they start college. Now, one thing I want to point out is that in order to be considered for those grants, loans, and work study that I just described, students must file the FAFSA. So in filing the FAFSA is how you're seeing if you're eligible for these different types of financial aid. So that gives you a very brief overview of financial aid and some of the basic terminology that you'll hear used quite frequently. Let's talk now a bit about what you can do to make sure that you, if you're a student, or your child, if you're a parent or guardian, receives as much financial aid as possible, really maximizing those opportunities. We'll cover each one of these in a bit more detail, but here's an overview for you. The first is filing the FAFSA, or the Alternative Application for Illinois Financial Aid. You only need to file one of these applications. They are free to complete, and I recommend that you file this by the end of October. The second is to apply to colleges and universities by their early application deadlines, which usually begin around November 1st. So in doing so, you're really not only getting ahead of the application game, but there are some financial aid benefits as well in some cases. And then from there, applying to a range of colleges and including schools that are really financial fits, so schools that your family can afford. And finally, applying to scholarships, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So step one, as I mentioned on this journey, if you will, is to file a financial aid application, being the FAFSA or the alternative application. And these are the two, the FAFSA and the alternative application for Illinois financial aid, or the alternative app. These are the two main financial aid applications that seniors need to submit. If you're applying to highly selective schools, you may also see something called the CSS profile. This would be in addition to these applications. And there are several similarities between these two applications, including several different benefits. So first of all, new for the class of 2021 in the state of Illinois, filing one of these applications is a graduation requirement, unless you choose to sign a waiver, which will be available to you as well. But that's a very important reason right off the bat why you'll want to apply for one of these financial aid applications. The second being that they both use financial information. So regardless of which form you complete, you can expect to be asked for your taxes and other documents about your finances from 2019. And this applies both to a parent as well as the child or a student. And then using this financial information, what these two have in common is that they calculate your expected family contribution, or EFC. So you input all of this information about finances that generates the EFC number. And then that's important because the EFC number compiled from one specific source is then sent out to the colleges and universities that you apply to so that they can tell you specifically how much financial aid you can receive. So another reason to fill out the forms. And then finally, they help determine your child's eligibility for special programs. So for instance, State of Illinois has some great programs for future teachers. There is a tuition waiver program for students who wish to become special education teachers. There is also a special program for students who are in underrepresented groups who want to become teachers. And a number of other federal programs and state level programs as well. So very important additional reasons to complete these applications. Now, you're hearing me talk about two applications, but what's important to know that separates them is the eligibility requirements that they have. So for the FAFSA, a student must be a US citizen, this is only the student, or a permanent resident, or have a specific designation such as a refugee or a T visa holder. If you're not sure whether you're eligible, please feel free to reach out and we can help you determine that. It's also available on the FAFSA website. Now, the alternative app is open specifically to undocumented students, certain undocumented students, as well as students who are transgender. And I'm going to describe these two in a little bit more detail. For our undocumented students, you qualify for the alternative app if you have lived in the state of Illinois for at least 3 years by the time that you graduate. So in this case, by May 2021, you will have lived in Illinois for at least 3 years. And you must have lived with a parent or guardian during that time. Now, for transgender students, this is important because in the FAFSA, there is a requirement that if you were assigned a male gender identity at birth, that you register for the selective service. This is a requirement in order to receive federal level student aid. Now, if you feel that you cannot fulfill that requirement and that doesn't reflect your situation, then you can fill out the alternative app. If you have any questions about this, please, again, do not hesitate to reach out, and I'm happy to help you navigate. So this is what the FAFSA website looks like when you go out to find the FAFSA. You'll find it online, fill out the form and submit it online. Very important to note this URL here. We always joke that it's called the free application for federal student aid because it's free. So I share this screenshot and that anecdote because there are scams out there. You should never have to pay to apply to receive money or financial aid. And also keep in mind, this is what the website looks like. You're going to be asked for something called an FSA ID. Both the student needs one and the parent needs one. If you have an older child, you may have already created this. You can only have one FSA ID per parent. So make sure that you check for that information. If you are a student or if you're a parent who does not have a social security number, and I'm sorry, if the parent does not have a social security number, then they cannot create an FSA ID. And in the form, what you'll see is that you'll end up printing out the FAFSA, signing it by hand, and then mailing it in through the post office. So slightly different process, but you can still fill out this form. And then this is what the alternative app looks like. It comes from the state of Illinois. You can see towards the bottom of the screenshot here that they have you start by selecting the academic year that you are applying for. For both the FAFSA and the alternative app, you are applying for the 2021 to 2022 school year because that is when you will be in college. So just make sure that you're selecting the right application. So as I mentioned, there are many benefits to filling out these applications, but wanted to really just break it down a bit more specifically for you. First off, if your child is eligible for the FAFSA, they can be considered for the Pell Grant, which in the past has been worth up to $6,345. So very generally speaking, because these guidelines can change, oftentimes families ask, well, who's eligible for this? So again, generally speaking, if we're talking about a household of 4 people, one child is going to college, you're looking at an adjusted gross income of $57,000 to $59,000 a year. This may change. Next, then from there is the MAP grant, and that comes from the state of Illinois, and it's worth $5,340. So that's what it's been in years past. Usually for the MAP grant, you're eligible, again, thinking about that family of 4, one child in college, where there is an adjusted gross income of $68,000 to $69,500 per year. So this may change slightly, but gives you a bit of guidance as to what framework you're working within. Then from there, other benefits of completing the FAFSA. There are student loans, which students, you're capped out at taking out no more than $5,500 worth of student loans in your first year. That can then be supplemented by Parent Plus loans, loans for parents that come from the federal government, and we'll talk about that more later. Those work-study programs I mentioned earlier are something that you are seeing if you're eligible for through the FAFSA, so it's another benefit, as well as those other grants and programs that I mentioned. Now, if you're a student or your child is eligible for the alternative app, they are also eligible for the MAP grant, or they may be eligible for the MAP grant, that $5,340, as well as other programs in the state of Illinois, including both of those programs for teachers that I mentioned earlier. Now, as you can see, the Pell Grant and the MAP grant are worth a good amount of money that can certainly take you a long way depending on the cost of attendance of the school that you're looking at. Now, this money also does run out at a certain point of time in the year. So this is why we encourage families to file their applications by October 31st. Please do not see this as a need to rush through the application because you don't want to make a mistake and then go through the process of fixing that mistake if it can be avoided. But highly suggest that you get it in by the end of the month. And we do have opportunities for assistance that I will mention later. And one quick word about student loans that I think is really important to mention, because oftentimes there's a lot of concern about student loans, and I just want to highlight, not all student loans are bad so long as you're smart about it. So first of all, it's really important to consider that this is an investment. So with any investment, you're looking at the return on that investment in the long run. Right now, the interest rate for student loans is at 2.75%. This is very low compared to years past. Our current freshmen in college right now are actually fortunate that it is so low, and we expect to see the same thing for this year's graduating class. And generally speaking, kind of a couple rules of thumb for you to consider with student loans. They're usually reasonable so long as the student avoids taking out more loans than the ones that are offered to them from the federal government. So over 4 years, because each year you have a different amount of federal loans you're allowed to take out, that total comes out to be about $27,000. If you were to think about future loan payments with interest, that comes out to about $270 to $275 a month for 10 years. So puts it into perspective when you think about your other household bills. Now, another good rule of thumb to follow is that the amount in student loans should be no more than 10% of your child's first year of salary after they graduate from college and are earning that salary that they get with a college degree. Now, I'm more than happy to sit down with you and or your student to help you calculate these numbers. We have some great data at our fingertips that we can look at even on a local level, but just very important to think about, again, from that investment standpoint. So back to those applications, how to actually file them. As I mentioned before, you will want to file them by the end of this month if possible. You can file after this month too. If you're seeing this at a later point in time, please know that you are not prevented from filing these applications, and it is still certainly a good idea to get them in. But another reason why we suggest getting it done earlier is that colleges may have specific deadlines as well. Next, from there, who's filing that application? Well, it's the high school senior, or next year, a college student with the help of a parent. This is a form that needs to be completed every year that the child is planning to go to college the following year. And how? Online, as you saw with the website screenshots that I included. Just again, remember, you should not pay for these applications. So one thing for you to know too is that within these forms, you will be asked for parent information. For that parent information that's required for most students, they're referring to biological parents, adoptive parents, and step parents if that step parent is married to a biological parent. It does not include legal guardians. So if you are concerned about getting a parent's information, please let me know. There are certain other steps that we can take. But one thing to know, very common question that comes up, is what happens if my parents are divorced? If parents are divorced, the parent that the student lives with the most is the one who should be included on the form. If you are a divorced parent, you also just want to make sure that you know the date of your divorce, and then if you have remarried, when you were remarried. Having those dates accessible makes life a little bit easier. So then other information that you will be asked for on the forms, both the FAFSA and the alternative app, will ask you for information from your 2019 tax returns, from your 2019 W-2 forms, and in any other records of income that you have. This is for both the parent and for the child, so very important to know. You'll also be asked, it will be helpful to have handy banking statements and a record of any investments. You'll be asked for these numbers. Even specifically, you'll be asked for the current balance of any checking and savings accounts as of that point in time. You'll be asked for any records of untaxed income, any money that wasn't included in the taxes, and then a list of 10 colleges that your student wants to attend. Now, please rest assured this can be changed later if needed, but always a good idea to put in those 10 schools from the very beginning. So that's what's needed for both the FAFSA and the alternative app. For the FAFSA only, you also need a few different items. You need the social security number of the child who will be a future college student. Now, if the parent does not have a social security number, when you're asked for that information, enter in all zeros. Do not, by any means, enter in the ITIN. Again, enter in all zeros for the social security number. Do not enter in your ITIN information. If the student is not a US citizen but is still eligible for the FAFSA, you'll instead need their alien registration number. And then finally, you'll need a federal student ID or FSA ID. Both the student needs this and the parent needs this. Essentially, it's a username and a password that's connected to a social security number. So as I mentioned before, if you have older children, you will need to use the same FSA ID that you did before, because each social security number can only be used for an FSA ID once. So on to other ways to make the most of your financial aid outside of filling out the FAFSA or the alternative app. Number 2, I cannot stress this enough, applying to colleges by early deadlines can be very, very helpful. And that's because many colleges have a deadline for priority or maximum scholarship consideration in addition to their application deadline. So it's not just about getting into the school, it's also about how much money you can get from the school. So this chart gives you a few examples for popular schools with our students. UIC, even though their early application is due by November 2nd, so long as you apply by December 1st and make sure your FAFSA or alternative app is in, you'll be considered for full scholarships. For DePaul, their priority scholarship consideration deadline is the same as their early action deadline, which is November 15th. And then for Oakton, you actually need to be admitted before they will even consider you for scholarships. So really, before you can even apply for scholarships. So those are usually due at the end of February, early March. Usually it's a good idea to get in that Oakton application by December winter break if you can. So next, number 3 that I would say to maximize your financial aid opportunities is that it's very important to apply to a range of colleges. And the kind of golden rule that I use is a range of 5 to 8 different colleges where some are matches, where the student's GPA is really right on track with most of the students who were admitted there in the year past. Then you'll also want to have some probable or likely schools where your student's GPA is higher than most of the students who were admitted to the school in the past. And finally, some that are reach schools where your student's GPA is a little bit lower than most students who were admitted there. Maybe their acceptance rate is a bit lower as well. By applying to this range of schools and to multiple options, it really allows you to see how much money colleges would give for your student to go to school there. And it's important to be able to make that comparison. I also suggest that you include both public and private schools. Public schools, especially in state in Illinois, will look cheaper, but sometimes private schools will offer you more money in scholarships that make the cost difference really come down. So again, important to balance that out. And very important, you will want to include at least one financial fit in the applications. So a school that your family can afford. And you can determine this by researching the school's cost of attendance on their website and also using something called the net price calculator on the college's website. Very important to do this research. I recommend having at least most of your lists be financial fits if possible, but very important for you to know what every school costs so that you have realistic expectations and can further see where you might need to pull in additional financial aid. Okay, so then number 4, finally, to apply to outside scholarships is another great way to maximize your financial aid. I always tell students it's very, very rare that you receive too much money from scholarships. So apply to as many as you can and as many as you can reasonably apply to. So when you're looking for scholarships, a shortcut that I always share with students is to look anywhere that you may spend or receive money. So nonprofit organizations who may give money out to individuals or to causes, corporations, brands where you're spending your money, or other organizations. For parents especially, it helps to ask if you have an HR department whether your company offers a scholarship for students. Sometimes this is a benefit offered to employees, so make sure that you find out so you can take advantage of it. Now, keep in mind, if you're looking for scholarships right now and you're not seeing very many and feeling discouraged, please take heart that many scholarships will actually open in December. They tend to peak second semester as we get into February, so please do not feel discouraged. And then as you look at those scholarships, good to take a peek at whether they're renewable for all 4 years of college or if they can only be used for the following year. That just helps you do a little bit of long-term planning with your college costs. So 3 tips for scholarships that I always share. Always happy to talk with you more about this later if you'd like. It's really all about decreasing the number of people that you're competing with for the scholarship. So local, not national scholarships are good, right? Rather than competing with students from all over the country, narrowing that down to maybe states in the Midwest or Illinois or Cook County or even Maine West High School. Then from there, scholarships with very specific eligibility criteria are usually better. So maybe by major, there are some great scholarships available specific to aviation, for instance, which isn't a terribly common interest, but also by GPA, looking to see how they are kind of filtering down the number of students who can apply. And then scholarships that require some sort of extra effort. So usually that means an essay, a video. Not everyone's willing to do this. So again, narrowing down the number of people who want to apply. So the final thought that I'm going to leave you with this, and if you take nothing else away, outside of course, completing that FAFSA or the alternative app, is just because you have the option to pay more does not necessarily mean that that option is better. You should always, always be asking, where am I going to get the greatest return on investment based on what my future salary with that college degree in hand will be? So you can start now by thinking about that financial fit that we discussed for the schools that your child applies to. And then from there, really seeking every opportunity available to you for financial aid. So again, looking at all those opportunities for financial aid, how can you maximize that? This timeline gives you an overview. In October, again, file that FAFSA or the alternative app and make sure that you have that range of colleges and financial fits on your child's college list. Then in November, begin submitting those college applications for early deadlines. Very, very important. November 1 will be here before we know it. In December, really begin to intensify your scholarship search if you're not able to do that sooner. And then in February through March, you'll start receiving your full financial aid offers, right? In December, you might receive scholarship information, but not the full offer. So hold out for that full offer, and you will be asked by colleges to provide documents to verify certain information that you provided on the FAFSA. No matter what, make sure your child and your family have a conversation about those offers and really compare them to one another before making a final decision. So please know this is a lot of information. I know that the applications themselves can sometimes be a little bit confusing to complete. So by all means, you are not alone in this. We have many opportunities for you to get some help. I actually recommend that both students and parents attend these since information is required from both parties. And since these are all happening virtually, you should have an email from me already with links to join these sessions or to register for them. If you can't find it, No problem. Please feel free to send me an email and I'm happy to send it your way again. So we actually start on Thursday. We were able to add in one more slot. So this Thursday, October 8th, with a virtual financial aid application help session from 5 to 7 p.m. If you come to one of these help sessions, to really make the most of your time, I highly recommend that you have started your FAFSA or your alternative app beforehand. At a minimum, that you've created your FSA ID and that you have gathered all of your documents. That way you can really focus on what you need the most help with. Please know that while these are open sessions, we will also have breakout rooms to help protect your privacy. So for those more personal questions. We are also hosting an overview presentation about the FAFSA and specific tips for filling that out on October 19th. That does require advanced registration. So highly recommend coming to that as well so that you can get some pointers for each section. And then finally, if you're unable to attend the sessions and you need help, we also have appointments available. We have office hours with a representative from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and you're more than welcome to utilize those to seek assistance. So again, thank you very much for your time in watching this video. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can contact me via email or phone. Happy to help you, and best of luck to you.